Hey, so this video is to help you get started using the scales and arpeggios that go along with the tune Fiddle Funk by Randy Sabien from the Jazz Philharmonic book. I've got up on my screen the scale and arpeggio sheet for violin, and I've also got down here the Fiddle Funk tune backing track with the violin removed, and you can find that on the CD that comes with the book. So anyway, the idea here is that all music is made up of scales and arpeggios. That's the language of music, that's your vocabulary. So if you want to get started improvising on a tune like Fiddle Funk, or any tune for that matter, this is a really good approach to take its chord progression and then break down all of the scales and arpeggios that fit with it and make sure that you have those pretty easily under your fingers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play down all the way through each scale and arpeggio just to give you an idea of how it fits together. Now, if you were actually practicing this, or when I've actually practiced this, that's not a good way to do it. I would, if you look up here at the screen, you can see that I've got repeats around each section, where I have the first section is scales descending, ascending, and then descending. And then the next section, descending, then ascending. Then I have arpeggios going up and then down, and then the arpeggios going down and then up. Being able to approach your scales and arpeggios from both directions is really important. So what I would do is just observe these repeat signs and play this section over and over and over again until you start getting comfortable with it. Then move on to the descending and play that a whole bunch of times. And the same with the arpeggios. You'll notice I've got VLC player here set to loop, because this backing track is only 2 minutes long. It's not enough time, right? So I just keep it looping, and I'll work on a section until I feel good about it, and then I'll move on to the next section, only later on stitching them together like I'm about to do for you now. When I'm done playing it down, we'll come back and I'll give you some ideas for taking these scales and arpeggios and turning them into some pretty easy but effective improvisation ideas. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this down for you.
Fiddle Funk, tune.
1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. But like I said, if I was really practicing this, I would repeat a few things. I mean, you probably noticed there were a couple of spots where I wasn't perfectly in tune. But that's not always the point, So if I'm working on really getting perfectly in tune, I'm going to repeat that a few times. But for now, I just wanted to run down through it. All right, so this time I'm going to show you how to use these scales and arpeggios just to get a start on some basic improvisation ideas. So I'm going to start just with the ascending section, and I may move on to the descending section. I may not. We'll see how it goes. And I'm going to just add in some rhythmic ideas. I'm not going to play straight eighth notes. I'm going to repeat some notes. I'm going to play some a little faster. I'm going to play some a little bit slower, and just turn these scales into an improvised melody. Now, what's going to happen is if I try to go a little bit slower and I don't quite get to the end of the measure, then I'm just going to skip to the beginning, the first note of whatever is the next measure, right? So you can see how just this very simple idea can turn it into at least a good start towards improvising a melody.
Fiddle Funk, tune.
1, 2, 3. So I wouldn't call that a fantastic improvisation, but it's just using those scales and trying to generate some ideas. You see a couple of times I just went, back and forth between a note instead of just staying on one, and you can do all kinds of things like that. The next step would be to just kind of go up and down the scales a little bit. You go back and forth, and then when you have the up ones and the down ones all really clean under your hands, then you can just run scales back and forth, aiming for those beginning notes of each measure. So for example, I'll do a little bit of that, and then we'll wrap up this video. And, I'll just start it from the top here.
Fiddle funk. Tune.
1, 2, 3. Just an idea. You can see I was running scales up, I was running scales down, I was generally speaking skipping to the first note of the next scale measure. Sometimes just going back and forth between two notes, and if you know your scales and arpeggios, that's a great way to at least get started improvising your own melodies.